President of the United States, President Donald Trump, who took a moment there to address the plenary and the chamber at the United Nations General Assembly. Several things that the president said, and the sticking points of his speech were on energy and the United Nations' role in escalating conflicts and migration issues around the world. The president says climate change is the greatest con job ever perpetrated. Europe is in serious trouble over migration. The United Nations is a conduit of migrants all over the world. Trump references US strikes on alleged drug vessels. He spoke about how the United States is going to help world leaders in forging peace around the world. He spoke about Ukraine. He spoke about Gaza. He says that hostages must be returned, and that's why the United States is not recognizing the state of Palestine, because that will be honoring Hamas and strengthening Hamas. He also says your countries are going to hell. Trump says that leaders who protect borders, their countries, are going to hell. He also accused the United Nations of facilitating invasions of Western countries by migrants. He says the US will pioneer AI system to tackle bioweapons, but doesn't offer any more details. Let's speak to our correspondent Susan Teherani. She is live at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Susan, quite a fiery speech by the United States President. He spoke for almost an hour. The sticking points here, like I mentioned, is energy and admonishing the United Nations.
Yeah, he also focused heavily on migration, illegal immigration, really giving Europe, notably, a dire warning about those so-called asylum seekers that enter the country illegally and how their society will ultimately be impacted. This is something that President Trump is very, very passionate about. He has a conviction. He believes that he has a referendum, at least from the American people, when it comes to the issue of illegal immigration into the United States. And he took that message, of course, directly to world leaders in a packed hall where you couldn't really throw a needle. And very fascinating that the First Lady Melania Trump was also in attendance. We don't recall in recent memory any of the former First Ladies being in attendance during the president's and former president's speeches. But he really wanted to bring and harp this message home. He said, I have a feeling about things. And I would just want to say, Eric, you may remember during his first term, he warned Germany because of its heavily reliance on renewable energy and the experiment that they were doing, that they were ultimately going to face an energy crisis. And if you remember, the German delegation was laughing at him during his first term when he made that speech. Well, not much laughter now. Most of these European nations are now trying to court the president, and we did see that Europe was facing an energy crisis. Notably, it really came to the forefront after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But yes, he didn't have kind words for the United Nations. He said that actions speak louder than words, and he believes that there is a lot of talk and bureaucracy here. Perhaps that is why he has decided to cut a lot of funding for a lot of the organizations here at the UN, and sort of talking about how initially his teleprompter didn't work. He was met with a broken escalator here at the UN. And these were all jabs meant to say that the United Nations, the question that diplomats are even asking, is it in a free fall? And some of the reason for that is because the US is its biggest donor. But the other reason is there's this donor fatigue among many countries who are just not paying their dues to the United Nations for one reason or the other. So he brought that sticking point to the forefront. Of course, the wars in Gaza and Ukraine were heavily mentioned. Bring the hostages home. He talked about the former administration, of course, not favorably here in the United States. And it's also important to note, and I know our viewers know this, this speech, of course, is geared to the world. but it's also geared to the American people as well. He knew that people here in the United States, if there's one speech at the UN that they'll be watching, it will be the speech of the US president. And also, I thought it was fascinating that he talked about the UN at first, but the first foreign policy challenge, and in his view, and administration's view, perhaps victory, was Iran. Iran seems to play very heavily moving forward in the president's agenda, at least in the next year or so. And he talked about the military activity with the hope of putting out Iran's nuclear facilities, and the United States aided Israel in that. That was the first one he mentioned. And then, of course, he moved on to the Middle East and then Ukraine. And also, he did mention India twice, once about buying Russian oil along with China. He also mentioned India in the context of how he stopped numerous wars and how he saw that the Russia-Ukraine war seems to be the most difficult. So, as anticipated, as we had foreseen before, he didn't pull any punches. I thought it was interesting that at the end of his speech, because he had sort of met Lula da Silva of Brazil and they had embraced, it was the first time you see President Trump sort of apologizing before he makes a bad comment about a certain country. So that was interesting. But yeah, it's clear they don't believe in climate change. They don't believe in climate change. He does not believe that, it's a big threat. He wants drill, baby, drill. And very in character from the President of the United States here. As you mentioned, almost an hour, about 53 to 55 minutes.
Actually, it was 55 minutes, and he really went hard on climate change, actually calling climate change a con job. He actually spoke about the United Nations building. In 2012, if you may recall, he famously said that the cheap tiles near the podium bothered him. He actually said that he did assist, or he sent a helping hand to the United Nations. He wanted the United Nations to rebuild the building, but he says that the United Nations actually wasted a lot of money.
Yeah, he talked about the building. He prides himself as being a construction developer, and there are many that say that it is owed to Donald Trump and his father that New York City has this skyline. I do want to say, this is just a guess, but the United Nations is right across the street from Trump Tower. I can even show you Trump Tower here right now. That is the building over there. It's right across from one of Trump Towers. I'm wondering whether or not he was so concerned about the way the UN looks because of its proximity to one of his own buildings and how that real estate is going to be perceived and what that building is really looking at. But nonetheless, yes, he seemed to have some bitter memories about how he wasn't chosen for the one to rebuild and refurbish the United Nations.
All right, much anticipated talk by US President Donald Trump there. He made his speech, 55 minutes long speech. That is our correspondent Susan Teherani outside the headquarters of the United Nations. Susan, thank you.